The examine life philosophy begins with a simple question: why? Socrates famously declared that the unexamined life is not worth living. This is where we start, questioning everything we take for granted. At this level, you learn that wisdom begins not with answers but with curiosity. The philosophical journey demands that you challenge assumptions, probe beneath the surface, and never accept, because that's how it is, as sufficient. Most people live on autopilot, accepting what they're told, following traditions without thought, never asking why they believe what they believe. Philosophy is the act of waking up from that slumber. It's uncomfortable because it means admitting you might be wrong about things you believed your entire life. But that discomfort is where growth begins. Epistemology. What can we know? Epistemology is the study of knowledge itself. How do we know what we know? Can we trust our senses, our memories, our reasoning? This branch asks fundamental questions. What is the difference between belief and knowledge? Can we ever achieve certainty? Philosophers like Descartes doubted everything until he found one undeniable truth: his own existence as a thinking being. But even that raises questions. Your senses have deceived you before. Optical illusions prove that. Your memories can be false or distorted. The facts you learned in school sometimes get revised or overturned. So what can you really know for certain? Epistemology doesn't just ask academic questions. It challenges the very foundation of how you understand reality and make decisions about what's true. Metaphysics. What is real? Metaphysics explores the nature of reality itself. What exists? Why does anything exist at all? Is there a difference between appearance and reality? This field tackles questions about being, existence, objects, properties, space, time, causality, and possibility. It's abstract and mind-bending because it questions things we normally take for granted. Is the chair you're sitting on truly a unified object, or just atoms arranged in a pattern? Do numbers exist independently of human minds? Is time an actual feature of reality, or just how we experience change? These might seem like pointless puzzles, but they're foundational. Your answers to metaphysical questions shape everything else: your ethics, your understanding of yourself. If you believe humans have immaterial souls, that leads to different conclusions than if you believe we're purely physical beings. Ethics. How should we live? Ethics is the branch of philosophy concerned with morality, right and wrong, good and bad. It asks, what makes an action moral? Should we follow rules or focus on consequences? Is morality objective or subjective? From Aristotle's virtue ethics to Kant's categorical imperative, ethics provides frameworks for living a good life. But it's not just abstract theory. Every day you make ethical choices. Do you tell a white lie to spare feelings? Do you report a coworker's mistake? Do you give money to that homeless person? Your ethical framework, whether conscious or not, guides these decisions. Some people believe morality comes from God. Others think it's about maximizing happiness. Still others focus on rights, duties, or character development. Ethics forces you to articulate and justify your deepest values about how humans should treat each other and what constitutes a life well lived. Logic, the structure of reasoning. Logic is the backbone of philosophy. It provides the rules for valid reasoning, helping us distinguish good arguments from bad ones. At this level, you learn about premises, conclusions, validity, soundness, and logical fallacies. Logic isn't just about winning debates, it's about thinking clearly and avoiding errors in reasoning. When someone says, everyone I know votes for Party X, so Party X must be right, that's a logical fallacy. When someone argues we've always done it this way, so we should continue, that's another fallacy. Logic gives you tools to identify flawed reasoning in advertising, politics, and everyday conversation. It teaches you that an argument can be logically valid even if its conclusion is false, if the premises are false, and that an argument with a true conclusion can still be logically invalid. Understanding logic transforms how you process information and make decisions. Aesthetics. What is beauty? Aesthetics explores the nature of art, beauty, and taste. What makes something beautiful? Is beauty objective or in the eye of the beholder? This branch examines our emotional and sensory responses to the world, from paintings and music to nature and design. It asks whether aesthetic judgments can be true or false. When you say this painting is beautiful or that music is terrible, are you stating a fact about the object or just reporting your subjective feelings? Philosophers have debated this for millennia. Some argue beauty reflects objective mathematical proportions and harmony. Others claim it's entirely cultural and personal. Aesthetics also examines what makes art valuable, whether artists' intentions matter, and why humans create and consume art at all. These questions matter because art and beauty profoundly affect human well-being, culture, and meaning. Political philosophy. How should society be organized? Political philosophy examines justice, rights, liberty, law, and the legitimacy of government. What makes a society just? Should individuals prioritize freedom or equality? From Plato's Republic to Rawls' theory of justice, this field shapes how we think about governance, power, and the common good. These aren't just theoretical questions. They determine whether you believe taxation is theft or necessary contribution, whether you support welfare programs or consider them government overreach, whether you think democracy is the best system or merely the least bad. Political philosophy asks why we have governments at all, what makes laws legitimate when civil disobedience is justified, and how to balance individual rights against collective needs. Every political debate about healthcare, immigration, military spending, criminal justice rests on deeper philosophical assumptions about human nature, freedom, and justice. Philosophy of mind. What is consciousness? The philosophy of mind investigates the nature of consciousness, mental states, and the relationship between mind and body. Are we just physical beings, or is there something more? How do thoughts arise from brain activity? This field tackles the mystery of subjective experience, what it's like to be you. Neuroscience can map which brain regions activate when you think about pizza, but it can't explain why that neural activity feels like something. Why does pain hurt rather than just being information processed by your brain? Could a sufficiently advanced computer program be conscious, or does consciousness require something special beyond computation? These questions affect everything from whether we can upload minds to computers, to whether animals are conscious, to what happens when we die. The hard problem of consciousness, explaining how physical processes produce subjective experience, remains one of philosophy's deepest mysteries. Philosophy of language. How does meaning work? Language shapes our reality in profound ways. This branch explores how words acquire meaning, how language relates to thought, and whether reality exists independently of how we describe it. Philosophers like Wittgenstein argued that many philosophical problems arise from misunderstanding language itself. Consider the sentence, "The present king of France is bald. France has no king, so is that statement false, or meaningless, or something else?" Questions like this might seem trivial, but they reveal deep issues about reference, truth, and meaning. Does language reflect an independent reality, or does it construct reality? Can you think without language? Different languages divide up reality differently. Some have dozens of words for snow, others treat blue and green as one color. Does that mean speakers of different languages experience different realities? Philosophy of language explores these questions and their implications for everything from translation to artificial intelligence. Philosophy of science. What is scientific knowledge? This field examines the foundations, methods, and implications of science. What makes something scientific? How do we distinguish science from pseudoscience? Can scientific theories ever be proven true or only falsified? It explores observation, experimentation, and the nature of scientific progress. When you hear "trust the science," philosophy of science asks, what does that mean? Science isn't a monolithic authority, it's a method, constantly revising itself. Yesterday's scientific consensus is today's outdated theory. Phlogiston, the luminiferous ether, Newtonian absolute space, all once accepted, now rejected. So what makes current scientific theories reliable? Karl Popper argued that scientific theories must be falsifiable, able to be proven wrong. Thomas Kuhn showed that science progresses through revolutionary paradigm shifts, not steady accumulation. Philosophy of science matters because it helps us understand what scientific claims really mean, when to trust them, and what their limits are. Existentialism, finding meaning in absurdity. Existentialism focuses on individual existence, freedom, and choice. Thinkers like Sartre, Camus, and Kierkegaard argued that life has no predetermined meaning. We must create it ourselves. This philosophy emphasizes authenticity, personal responsibility, and the anxiety that comes with radical freedom. The existentialist message is both terrifying and liberating. You are radically free. There's no cosmic instruction manual, no inherent purpose, no destiny. You must choose who you become, and you're responsible for those choices. You can't blame God, fate, or society for who you are. This freedom causes anxiety, what Sartre called anguish, because every choice closes off other possibilities. When you choose a career, you're also choosing not to pursue countless other careers. But this freedom also means you can reinvent yourself at any moment. Existentialism rejects excuses and demands that you live authentically, true to your own values rather than society's expectations. Stoicism, mastering your inner citadel. Stoicism teaches that while we cannot control external events, we can control our responses. Philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus emphasized virtue, rationality, and emotional resilience. The Stoics seek tranquility through acceptance of fate and focus on what lies within their power. This ancient philosophy has surged in modern popularity because it's intensely practical. The Stoics divided everything into what you control, your judgments, reactions, values, and what you don't, other people's opinions, natural events, outcomes. Wasting energy on what you can't control leads to suffering. Instead, focus exclusively on your character and responses. When someone insults you, you don't control the insult, but you control whether it disturbs your peace. The Stoic doesn't suppress emotions but transforms them through rational examination. It's not about being emotionless, but about being undisturbed by things outside your control, while maintaining fierce commitment to virtue within your control. Utilitarianism, the greatest happiness principle, utilitarianism, developed by Bentham and Mill, judges actions by their consequences. The right action is the one that maximizes overall happiness and minimizes suffering. This consequentialist approach is practical, but faces challenges. Can we truly calculate happiness? Does it justify sacrificing individuals for the greater good? Imagine you're a doctor with 5 patients dying from organ failure and 1 healthy patient in for a checkup. Would utilitarian logic justify killing the healthy patient to harvest organs and save 5? Most people recoil from this conclusion, but if you're committed to maximizing overall happiness, why not? Utilitarians respond with sophisticated arguments about long-term consequences, rule utilitarianism versus act utilitarianism, and the hedonic calculus. But these challenges reveal deep tensions in consequentialist thinking. Still, utilitarianism influences modern policymaking, cost-benefit analysis, and effective altruism movements. Deontology, duty above all. Kant's deontological ethics argues that morality is about duty and principles, not consequences. Some actions are inherently right or wrong, regardless of outcomes. The categorical imperative demands we act only according to rules we could will to be universal laws, treating people as ends in themselves, never merely as means. For Kant, lying is always wrong, even to save a life, because if everyone lied when convenient, communication would become meaningless. This seems rigid, but Kant's point is profound. People have dignity. Using someone as a tool for your purposes, even good purposes, violates their humanity. If you lie to someone, you manipulate them, treating them as a means to your end. Deontology provides the foundation for concepts like human rights and inalienable dignity. It says some things are simply wrong, period. No calculation of consequences can justify them. This absolutism bothers some people, but provides clear moral boundaries others find essential. Virtue ethics, cultivating character. Aristotle's virtue ethics focuses not on rules or consequences but on character. What kind of person should I become? Virtue lies in the golden mean, the balance between extremes. Courage, temperance, wisdom, and justice are cultivated through practice, leading to eudaimonia, human flourishing. Rather than asking, "What should I do?" virtue ethics asks, "Who should I be?" Moral actions flow naturally from good character. You don't need rigid rules if you're a virtuous person. You'll instinctively do the right thing because that's who you are. Courage isn't recklessness, too much, or cowardice, too little, but the mean between them. Generosity balances between stinginess and wastefulness. Aristotle argued that virtues are habits developed through practice. You become brave by doing brave things, honest by practicing honesty. Modern virtue ethicists point out that rule-based systems can't cover every situation, but a virtuous person can navigate complexity through wisdom and good judgment. Skepticism, questioning everything. Philosophical skepticism doubts the possibility of certain knowledge. Can we ever truly know anything? Ancient skeptics like Pyrrho suspended judgment on all matters, while modern skeptics use doubt as a tool for rigorous inquiry. Skepticism keeps us humble and prevents dogmatism. But there are degrees. Radical skepticism doubts everything, even basic perceptions, leading to paralysis. Moderate skepticism questions specific claims while accepting that some knowledge is reliable enough for practical purposes. Scientific skepticism demands evidence before accepting claims. The skeptical mindset is healthy. It prevents gullibility, challenges authority, and demands justification. But taken too far, it becomes self-defeating. If you're skeptical of everything, why trust your skeptical reasoning? The art is finding balance, skeptical enough to question, but not so skeptical you believe nothing. In our age of misinformation, cultivating appropriate skepticism might be one of philosophy's most practical gifts. Rationalism, reason as the source of knowledge. Rationalists like Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz argued that reason, not experience, is the primary source of knowledge. They believe certain truths are innate or can be discovered through pure thought alone. Mathematics and logic provide models for this kind of a priori knowledge. You don't need to experience the world to know that 2 plus 2 equals 4 or that all bachelors are unmarried. These truths are discoverable through reason. Rationalists believed metaphysical truths about God, the soul, and reality structure could similarly be discovered through rational deduction from self-evident principles. This tradition gave us powerful philosophical systems and influenced the development of mathematics and logic. Critics argue that rationalists overestimate reason's power and underestimate experience's role. But rationalism reminds us that not all knowledge comes from observation. Some truths are accessible through thought alone, independent of what we see or touch. Empiricism, experience as the source of knowledge. In contrast, empiricists like Locke, Berkeley, and Hume claimed that all knowledge comes from sensory experience. The mind at birth is a blank slate written upon by experience. While rationalism trusts reason, empiricism trusts observation, the foundation of modern science. John Locke argued there are no innate ideas. Every concept originates from experience. Even abstract ideas like justice or beauty derive from combining and abstracting sensory experiences. David Hume pushed this further, arguing that cause and effect itself isn't something we observe, but a habit of mind developed from repeated experience. Empiricism grounds knowledge in the observable world, making it testable and public rather than private intuition. This approach led to the scientific method's dominance. But empiricism faces challenges. Mathematical truths seem independent of experience, and the principle, all knowledge comes from experience, itself isn't derived from experience, making it self-undermining. Phenomenology, the study of experience, founded by Husserl, Phenomenology examines the structures of consciousness and experience from the first-person perspective. It's not about what things are objectively, but how they appear to us, the phenomena of experience. This approach influenced existentialism and continues to shape psychology and cognitive science. Phenomenologists bracket assumptions about external reality and focus purely on describing experience as it presents itself. When you see a tree, you're not directly experiencing the tree itself, but your consciousness of the tree. Phenomenology explores this consciousness. How do objects appear in perception? How does time feel subjectively? What's the structure of emotions, memories, imagination? Heidegger used phenomenology to explore being, what it means to exist. Merleau-Ponty examined embodiment, how having a body shapes experience. Phenomenology reminds us that objective third-person science can't capture everything. First-person experience has its own validity and deserves systematic study. Pragmatism. Truth is what works. American pragmatists like Peirce, James, and Dewey argued that truth is not about correspondence to reality, but about practical consequences. An idea is true if it works, if it helps us navigate the world successfully. Pragmatism values results over abstract principles. This sounds crude, as if calling something true just means it's useful. But pragmatists argue that truth disconnected from practical consequences is meaningless. What does it mean to say a belief is true if it makes no difference to experience or action? Pragmatism shifts focus from eternal truths to what works here and now for solving problems. It's anti-dogmatic and experimental, treating ideas as tools rather than mirrors of reality. Critics say pragmatism conflates truth with usefulness. What if a false belief is comforting and useful? Pragmatists respond that over the long run, true beliefs work better than false ones. Pragmatism influenced American thought profoundly, emphasizing democracy, education, and problem-solving over ideology. Nihilism, the absence of meaning. Nihilism declares that life has no inherent meaning, value, or purpose. Nietzsche proclaimed, "God is dead," meaning traditional sources of meaning had collapsed. While some see nihilism as despair, others see it as liberation, freedom to create our own values in a meaningless universe. Nietzsche wasn't celebrating nihilism, he was diagnosing a cultural crisis. For centuries, religion provided meaning and values. When belief in God fades, what fills that void? Nihilism is the terrifying answer: nothing. No cosmic purpose, no objective morality, no inherent value. Some people sink into passive nihilism, depression, hedonism, or apathy. Why do anything if nothing matters? But Nietzsche advocated active nihilism, destroying old values to create new ones. If the universe provides no meaning, you're free to create it. This requires strength and creativity. Nihilism is a starting point, not an end point. The question is whether you have the courage to build meaning on a foundation of meaninglessness. Absurdism. Embracing the absurd, Camus identified the absurd, the conflict between our need for meaning and the universe's silence. Unlike nihilists who despair or existentialists who create meaning, Camus said we should embrace the absurd. Like Sisyphus rolling his boulder eternally, we should imagine him happy finding joy in the struggle itself. The absurd arises from three factors. Humans crave rational understanding. The universe is irrational and indifferent. Humans can't escape confronting this disconnect. We want answers. Reality provides none. This is absurd. Camus rejected suicide, physical escape, and philosophical suicide, leap of faith into religion or ideology. Instead, embrace the absurd. Live fully and passionately while acknowledging life's meaninglessness. Find joy in rebellion against the absurd, not through hope for transcendence but through engagement with life as it is. Sisyphus is happy not despite his pointless task but because he accepts it, owns it, and finds his dignity in the struggle. This is absurdism, heroic defiance in the face of meaninglessness. Determinism. Everything is caused. Determinism holds that every event, including human action, is the inevitable result of prior causes. If the universe operates like a chain of cause and effect, then free will is an illusion. Our choices are predetermined by biology, environment, and the laws of physics. Think about it. Every thought you have results from neuron firings caused by prior neuron firings, shaped by genetics you didn't choose and experiences you didn't fully control. Your decision to read this was determined by prior causes stretching back to the Big Bang. If scientists knew every particle's position and velocity, they could theoretically predict your every action. This is unsettling because it seems to eliminate moral responsibility. How can we blame criminals if they couldn't have done otherwise? How can we take credit for achievements if we were destined to succeed? Determinism forces us to reconceptualize responsibility, praise, blame, and the entire structure of society. Free will, the power to choose. Free will is the idea that we have genuine agency over our decisions. We are not merely products of fate, but authors of our actions. This belief underpins moral responsibility. Without free will, can we be held accountable for what we do? When you chose what to eat this morning, it felt like you were making a real choice, weighing options and deciding. Free will seems undeniable from the inside, yet neuroscience suggests your brain makes decisions before you're consciously aware of them. Does that mean the conscious you isn't really deciding? Libertarian free will advocates claim we have genuine, causally undetermined freedom. But if your choices aren't caused by anything, aren't they just random? How is random any more free than determined? The free will debate has enormous implications. Criminal justice, personal relationships, self-improvement efforts all assume we can genuinely choose. If that's an illusion, everything changes. Compatibilism, freedom within determinism. Compatibilism argues that free will and determinism can coexist. While our actions may be influenced by prior causes, we still possess meaningful freedom when we act according to our own desires and reasoning without external coercion. We are free when we are the authors of our choices, even if those choices have causes. This resolves the tension by redefining free will. You're free not when your actions are uncaused, impossible, or random, but when they flow from your own character, desires, and reasoning. A person forced at gunpoint isn't free because external coercion overrides their will, but a person choosing based on their own values and deliberation is free, even if that deliberation was caused by prior factors. The key distinction is internal versus external causation. Compatibilism preserves moral responsibility. We praise and blame people for actions that flow from their character because that character is who they are. This view dominates among philosophers precisely because it navigates between the extremes of determinism and libertarian free will. Dualism, mind and body are separate. Descartes' dualism posits that reality consists of two fundamentally different substances: the mental, mind, soul, consciousness, and the physical body, matter. The challenge is explaining how these interact, how immaterial thoughts cause physical actions. When you decide to raise your arm, that mental decision somehow causes physical neurons to fire and muscles to contract. But how does something non-physical affect something physical? Descartes proposed the pineal gland as the interaction point, but that just pushes the problem back. How does the immaterial soul affect the pineal gland? Dualism aligns with common intuition. Your subjective conscious experience feels totally different from mere matter. It seems impossible that neurons firing could equal the feeling of falling in love or tasting chocolate. But science increasingly shows correlations between brain states and mental states, making dualism harder to defend. Still, it captures something important: the explanatory gap between objective physical descriptions and subjective experience. Materialism, everything is physical. Materialism, or physicalism, claims that everything, including consciousness, is ultimately physical. Thoughts, emotions, and experiences are products of brain activity, neurons firing, chemicals flowing. There is no immaterial soul. Mind is what the brain does. This view dominates modern neuroscience and philosophy of mind. Brain damage affects personality and consciousness. Drugs alter mental states. Evolution shaped brains without needing to invoke souls. The materialist parsimony is appealing, one type of substance, physical, instead of two mysterious substances interacting. But materialism faces the hard problem of consciousness. How do physical processes produce subjective experience? Why does seeing red feel like something? Materialists respond that consciousness is simply what certain complex information processing feels like from the inside. But this feels incomplete to critics, who point out that no amount of objective physical description captures subjective what? Its likeness. The debate continues. Idealism, reality is mental. Idealism argues that reality is fundamentally mental or experiential. Berkeley claimed that objects only exist as perceptions in minds. There is no material world independent of consciousness. To be is to be perceived. This sounds crazy until you consider you've never experienced anything outside your consciousness. Everything you know comes through perception, thought, or feeling. The external world is always mediated by consciousness. How do you know there's anything beyond experience? Berkeley argued God perceives everything, ensuring things exist even when we're not observing them. Idealism solves the mind-body problem by denying matter exists. There's no puzzle about how mind and matter interact if there's only mind. Modern versions of idealism suggest consciousness is fundamental to reality, not an accidental byproduct of matter. While most philosophers reject idealism, it raises profound questions about the relationship between consciousness and reality. Monism, all is one. Monism holds that reality consists of only one fundamental substance or principle. Whether material, physicalism, mental idealism, or neutral monism, everything reduces to this single foundation. It contrasts with dualism's two-substance view. Spinoza's monism identified God with nature, one infinite substance with infinite attributes. Everything is a mode or expression of this single reality. This view avoids interaction problems because there's only one thing, viewed different ways. Neutral monism, proposed by William James, suggests the fundamental substance is neither mental nor physical, but something neutral that can manifest as either. Monism appeals to parsimony, explaining everything with one principle rather than multiple. But it must account for the apparent diversity of reality. How does one substance produce the rich variety we experience? Different monist theories answer differently, but all share the conviction that ultimate reality is unified, not divided. Pluralism, many truths, many realities. Pluralism accepts that multiple, potentially conflicting perspectives or truths can coexist. There isn't one single correct view of reality or morality. This philosophical stance values diversity of thought and resists totalizing theories that claim to explain everything. Pluralism isn't relativism. It doesn't say all views are equally valid. Rather, it suggests reality is complex enough that different frameworks can capture different aspects without any single framework being complete. In ethics, pluralism might accept that both utilitarian and deontological considerations matter, and they can conflict without either being wrong. In metaphysics, it might suggest reality has multiple irreducible levels: physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, each with its own valid descriptions. Pluralism fits our experience. Complex situations often involve genuine value conflicts, where multiple legitimate concerns pull in different directions. It encourages intellectual humility and dialogue across differences, rather than assuming one perspective has all answers. Relativism. Truth is contextual. Relativism argues that truth, morality, or knowledge is not absolute, but depends on culture, historical period, or individual perspective. What's true or right in one context may not be in another. This challenges universal claims but risks sliding into anything goes thinking. Cultural relativism observes that moral practices vary dramatically across cultures. Some practice arranged marriage, others see it as oppression. Some cultures emphasize individual rights, others prioritize community. Relativists argue this diversity shows morality is culturally constructed rather than universal. But critics ask, does this mean we can't criticize obviously harmful practices? Is female genital mutilation acceptable if it's culturally approved? Relativism struggles to condemn atrocities or champion universal human rights. Moderate relativism acknowledges cultural differences while maintaining some universal standards. Extreme relativism collapses into incoherence. If all truth is relative, is that claim itself relative? Relativism raises important questions about ethnocentrism and tolerance while struggling with its own implications. Objectivism. Truth is independent. Objectivism, in epistemology, holds that truth exists independently of our beliefs or perceptions. Reality is what it is, regardless of what anyone thinks. This opposes relativism and subjectivism, asserting that some claims are objectively true or false. When you say, the Earth orbits the Sun, you're making an objective claim, true regardless of opinion or culture. Objectivists extend this to ethics. Murder is objectively wrong, not just culturally disapproved. This position provides firm ground for knowledge and morality, avoiding relativism's slippery slope. But objectivism must explain disagreement. If moral truths are objective, why do people disagree so much about them? Objectivists respond that disagreement doesn't prove absence of truth. People disagree about scientific facts too. Some people just have false beliefs. Objectivism also faces the challenge of explaining how we access objective truths. If they're independent of minds, how do minds discover them? Despite challenges, objectivism captures the intuition that some things really are true or false, right or wrong, beyond mere opinion. Subjectivism. Truth is personal. Subjectivism claims that truth or moral values are determined by individual perspectives. What's true for you might not be true for me. While this respects personal experience, it struggles to account for shared reality or resolve disagreements. In ethics, subjectivism says moral judgments express personal feelings. Murder is wrong just means I disapprove of murder. This seems to respect individual autonomy and avoid imposing values, but it makes moral disagreement impossible. If you approve and I disapprove, we're both right, just reporting different feelings. We're not actually disagreeing about anything. Subjectivism also struggles with progress. Can we say society's moral views improved when we abolish slavery? Subjectivists must say no, just different subjective preferences. Most philosophers reject pure subjectivism because it can't account for genuine moral discourse, progress, or shared truth. But subjectivism reminds us that perspective matters and that claims to objective truth sometimes mask imposing one group's views on others. Realism. The world exists independently. Philosophical realism asserts that the external world exists independently of our perception or thought. Trees, stars, and atoms are real, whether or not anyone observes them. This common-sense view contrasts with idealism and certain interpretations of quantum mechanics. Realism seems obviously true. Mountains existed before humans evolved to perceive them. Scientific realism adds that scientific theories describe real entities and structures in the world. Electrons really exist. They're not just useful fictions, but anti-realists challenge this. We only ever experience our perceptions, never the things themselves. How do you know there's a reality beyond experience? Kant distinguished phenomena, things as they appear, from noumena, things as they are in themselves, arguing we can never know the latter. Quantum mechanics complicates realism. If observation affects reality, maybe reality isn't fully independent of observers. Despite philosophical challenges, realism remains most scientists' and laypeople's default position. Anti-realism. Reality is mind-dependent. Anti-realism challenges the independent existence of reality, arguing that what we call the world is constructed through language, concepts, or observation. Without minds to perceive it, reality as we know it wouldn't exist. This view appears in constructivism and certain interpretations of science. Anti-realism doesn't deny external reality entirely, but argues our knowledge is always mediated by conceptual frameworks. We can't compare our theories to reality, as it is because we only access reality through theories. Scientific anti-realists argue theories are useful instruments for prediction, not true descriptions of unobservable reality. We should be agnostic about whether electrons really exist. The theory works regardless. Social constructivism extends anti-realism to social categories, gender, race, and even scientific facts are partly constructed by social practices rather than simply discovered. Anti-realism challenges naive realism but risks sliding toward relativism. If reality is mind-dependent, whose mind determines it? The debate between realism and anti-realism shapes how we understand science, objectivity, and truth itself. Foundationalism, building on bedrock beliefs. Foundationalism in epistemology argues that knowledge is built on basic, self-evident beliefs that require no further justification. Like a building on solid ground, all other knowledge rests on these foundations. Examples might include logical truths or immediate sensory experiences. Descartes sought absolute foundations through his method of doubt, arriving at "I think, therefore I am" as the indubitable bedrock. From this, he tried to build all knowledge. Empiricist foundationalists point to sense experience as basic. "I see something red," requires no further justification. Foundationalism provides certainty and avoids infinite regress, every belief needing another belief to justify it endlessly. But critics question whether truly foundational beliefs exist. Even sense experience seems theory-laden. When you see a tree, you're interpreting patterns of light using concepts of tree. The search for indubitable foundations has largely failed. Even logic's laws have been questioned. Modern foundationalists seek more modest foundations, beliefs that are justified but not infallible. Coherentism. Beliefs support each other. Coherentism rejects foundationalism's basic beliefs, arguing instead that beliefs are justified by their coherence with other beliefs. Knowledge forms a web or network where beliefs mutually support each other, like a spiderweb with no single point of attachment. A belief is justified if it fits coherently with your other beliefs. Science works this way. Theories are justified by how well they cohere with observations, other theories, and background knowledge. No single observation proves a theory. It's the overall coherent picture. Coherentism avoids the regress problem. Beliefs don't need ultimate foundations because they support each other in a network. But critics ask, couldn't a coherent set of beliefs be completely false? A paranoid delusion can be internally coherent. Coherentists respond that we constantly test our beliefs against new experience, revising for greater coherence. The web is anchored by experience even without foundational beliefs. Coherentism better fits how knowledge actually works as interconnected networks rather than hierarchies built on foundations, but struggles to explain how belief systems connect to reality. Infinitism, justification goes on forever. Infinitism accepts that justification requires an infinite chain of reasons. Every belief needs justification, which itself needs justification, and so on endlessly. Rather than seeing this as a problem, infinitists argue we can have knowledge even without ultimate foundations. This sounds absurd. How can you have infinite justifications? Infinitists argue that justification is available in principle, even if never completed in practice. When you justify a belief, you can provide a reason. When asked to justify that reason, you can provide another. This could continue infinitely. The fact that we stop somewhere doesn't mean the chain couldn't continue. Knowledge doesn't require completed justification, just that justification is available if challenged. Critics argue this makes knowledge impossible in practice, and that infinite chains are epistemically worthless if they never ground out. Infinitism remains a minority view but raises important questions about the structure of justification and whether foundations are necessary. Naturalism, nature is all there is. Naturalism holds that everything arises from natural properties and causes. There is no supernatural realm, no gods, souls, or immaterial entities. Science is our best tool for understanding reality. This worldview dominates modern philosophy and science. Methodological naturalism is the scientific practice of explaining phenomena through natural causes, setting aside supernatural explanations. Ontological naturalism makes the stronger claim that nothing supernatural exists. Naturalism's success in explaining phenomena without invoking gods or spirits has made it philosophy's default position. But naturalism faces challenges. Can it account for consciousness, morality, and reason themselves? If our minds are products of natural selection aimed at survival, not truth, why trust them to reach true beliefs? Naturalists respond that evolution would favor accurate perceptions because accuracy aids survival. The naturalism debate isn't settled, but naturalism's explanatory power has made it modern thought's dominant framework, shaping everything from ethics to science to politics. Supernaturalism. Beyond the natural, supernaturalism claims that reality includes entities or forces beyond the natural world, gods, spirits, souls, or other non-physical phenomena. This view underlies most religious traditions and challenges naturalism's materialist assumptions. Supernaturalists argue that naturalism can't explain everything. Why does anything exist rather than nothing? Why are natural laws as they are? What grounds objective morality? Consciousness seems inexplicable in purely physical terms. These gaps, supernaturalists claim, point to supernatural reality. God explains the universe's existence and fine-tuning for life. Souls explain consciousness. Divine commands ground morality. Critics respond that positing supernatural entities doesn't truly explain, it just labels mysteries with names. Saying, God did it, doesn't tell us how. But supernaturalists counter that naturalism faces equally deep mysteries, and that supernatural explanations shouldn't be dismissed simply for being unfashionable in contemporary academia. The debate hinges on explanatory standards and what counts as a satisfying answer to ultimate questions. Theism. God exists. Theism is the belief in one or more gods who created and possibly intervene in the universe. Different forms include monotheism, one god, polytheism, many gods, and deism, God created but doesn't intervene. Theism provides answers to questions of ultimate meaning and morality. For theists, God explains why anything exists, provides objective moral standards, offers hope for justice and afterlife, and gives life ultimate purpose. Theistic arguments include cosmological, everything needs a cause, God is the first cause, teleological, the universe shows design, and moral. Objective morality requires a divine lawgiver. Theism profoundly shapes worldviews. If God exists, reality has built-in meaning and moral absolutes. Critics raise the problem of evil. If God is omnipotent, omniscient, and perfectly good, why does evil exist? Theists offer various responses, but the question remains challenging. Theism isn't just belief in God's existence. It's a comprehensive worldview about reality's nature, humanity's purpose, and how we should live. Atheism. No gods exist. Atheism is the absence of belief in gods, or the positive assertion that no gods exist. Atheists may embrace naturalism, finding meaning and morality without divine authority. This position has grown with scientific understanding and challenges to religious claims. Atheists argue that theistic arguments fail, that evil disproves a good God, and that natural explanations suffice without invoking deities. The burden of proof lies with those claiming extraordinary entities exist. Atheism doesn't automatically mean nihilism. Atheists find meaning in human relationships, achievements, beauty, and reducing suffering. Morality can be grounded in human well-being and social contracts rather than divine commands. Critics argue atheism can't ground objective morality or explain existence itself. Some worry atheism leads to nihilism or removes moral constraints. Atheists respond that morality precedes religion. We judge which religious texts are moral, not vice versa, and that meaning is more precious because life is finite. Atheism represents a fundamentally different worldview where humans create their own meaning and purpose. Agnosticism. We cannot know. Agnosticism claims we cannot know whether God exists. The evidence is insufficient either way, so we should suspend judgment. Some agnostics lean toward belief, others toward disbelief, but all acknowledge the limits of human knowledge regarding the divine. Thomas Huxley coined agnostic to describe his position, neither theist nor atheist, but genuinely uncertain. Agnostics argue that God's existence or non-existence can't be proven or disproven. The question lies beyond empirical investigation and logical proof. Unlike atheists who claim no God exists or theists who claim God exists, agnostics say, I don't know and maybe can't know. This position appeals to intellectual humility. Given profound disagreement among intelligent people across history, perhaps certainty is unjustified. Critics from both sides attack agnosticism as fence, sitting, or evasion, but agnostics respond that admitting uncertainty is honest and rational, given the evidence. Agnosticism comes in forms: weak agnosticism, currently don't know, versus strong agnosticism, can't ever know. It represents epistemological caution about ultimate metaphysical questions. Fideism, faith over reason. Fideism asserts that religious belief is based on faith rather than reason or evidence. Some matters transcend rational inquiry. You cannot prove God's existence, but you can believe. Kierkegaard exemplified this leap of faith approach. Fideists argue that demanding rational proof for God misunderstands religion's nature. Faith is trust and commitment, not conclusion of argument. Religious truths are existentially appropriated through subjective passion, not objectively demonstrated. Kierkegaard's leap of faith acknowledges that belief lacks rational justification, yet is necessary for authentic existence. Faith is a risk taken in passion, not safe rational calculation. Critics see fideism as intellectual surrender, believing despite evidence. How does it differ from wishful thinking? If faith alone justifies belief, why not believe anything? Fideists respond that faith isn't arbitrary, it's response to revelation or existential need. Reason has limits. At some point we must commit beyond certainty. Fideism represents one solution to faith: reason tension. Accepting they operate in different domains, with faith taking precedence in religious matters. Mysticism, direct experience of the divine. Mysticism emphasizes direct, personal experience of ultimate reality or union with the divine. Through meditation, contemplation, or altered states, mystics claim to transcend ordinary consciousness and glimpse deeper truths beyond language or rational thought. Mystics across traditions, Christian, Sufi, Buddhist, Hindu, report similar experiences: dissolution of self, other boundaries, timeless presence, ineffable unity, and profound peace. These aren't beliefs about God but direct encounters. Mystical experiences transform those who have them, making abstract religious concepts personally real. Mystics often describe their experiences as more real than ordinary reality, though indescribable in normal language. Critics dismiss mystical experiences as subjective hallucinations or brain states without evidential value. If they're genuinely beyond description, how can we evaluate their truth? Different traditions interpret similar experiences differently. One sees union with God, another sees Buddhist emptiness. But mystics counter that experience's ineffability doesn't negate its validity. Mysticism represents the experiential rather than intellectual or dogmatic side of religion, prioritizing transformation over doctrine. Pantheism. God is everything. Pantheism identifies God with the universe itself. Everything that exists is part of God. God is not a separate being, but the totality of existence. Spinoza's philosophy exemplifies this view, where God and nature are one, Deus sive natura. For pantheists, divinity isn't a supernatural person, but the universe's sacredness. Everything is divine, there's no separation between creator and creation. This view has spiritual appeal. It makes all existence holy while avoiding supernatural claims. Science studies God when it studies nature. Pantheism differs from atheism, which denies divinity, but also from traditional theism, which sees God as separate from creation. Critics argue pantheism is just atheism with spiritual language. If God equals the universe, why use the term God? What explanatory work does it do? Pantheists respond that the term recognizes reality's sacred character, encouraging reverence and wonder. Pantheism influences environmental ethics. Nature is sacred, not mere resource, and bridges religious and secular worldviews by finding divinity immanent in nature itself rather than transcendent beyond it. Panentheism. God contains everything. Panentheism holds that the universe exists within God, but God is greater than the universe. Unlike pantheism, where God equals the universe, panentheism sees God as including yet transcending all existence. The universe is in God, but God is more than the universe. God contains all existence, but also has aspects beyond physical reality. God is affected by the world's happenings. There's mutual relationship rather than one-way causation. The universe is God's body, but God also has transcendent aspects. Panentheism tries to combine theism's personal God with pantheism's immanence. God is both intimately present in everything and beyond everything. This resolves certain problems. God's goodness doesn't contradict evil because God experiences suffering alongside us and works to overcome it without having absolute control. Critics find panentheism conceptually unclear. How does this differ functionally from pantheism? But panentheists argue it captures religious intuitions better than either traditional theism's distinct God or pantheism's impersonal divinity. Solipsism, only I exist. Solipsism is the radical view that only one's own mind is certain to exist. Everything else, other people, the external world, might be illusion. While logically possible, solipsism is practically impossible to maintain and leads to philosophical isolation. You can't disprove solipsism. Maybe you're the only consciousness, and everything else is your dream or hallucination. Other people might be philosophical zombies, unconscious automata that behave like they're conscious. The external world might be elaborate illusion. You can't step outside your own consciousness to check. But solipsism is also unfalsifiable and practically useless. If taken seriously, it undermines all knowledge, science, relationships, and meaning. Most philosophers treat solipsism as philosophical curiosity rather than serious position. It demonstrates skepticism's limits. You can doubt everything except your own existence as thinking being. Descartes reached this point with his "I think, therefore I am," but then had to argue his way back to external world's existence. Solipsism reminds us that our connection to reality is always mediated by consciousness, but almost no one actually believes they're the only consciousness in existence. Physicalism. Only the physical exists. Physicalism claims that everything that exists is physical or supervenes on the physical. Mental states, consciousness, and even abstract concepts ultimately reduce to or depend on physical processes. For physicalists, there's one kind of stuff, physical matter, energy operating according to natural laws. Thoughts are brain states. Consciousness emerges from neural complexity. Emotions are chemical reactions. Everything is ultimately explicable in physical terms. This parsimony appeals, one substance, one set of laws, study by physics and sciences built on physics. Physicalism supports scientific worldview and avoids mysterious dualist interaction problems, but physicalism faces serious challenges. Can physical descriptions capture subjective experience? Knowing all neural firings during pain doesn't seem to explain what pain feels like. Abstract objects like numbers seem non-physical yet real. Consciousness, intentionality, meaning, all resist physical reduction. Physicalists respond with eliminativism, these don't really exist. Reductionism, they reduce to physical, or non-reductive physicalism, they're physical but irreducible. The debate continues at philosophy of mind's cutting edge. Functionalism. Mind is what the brain does. Functionalism defines mental states not by what they're made of, but by what they do, their functional role. Pain isn't a specific brain state, but whatever plays the pain role in a system. This view allows that computers or aliens could have minds if they perform the right functions. For functionalists, minds are software to the brain's hardware. What matters isn't biological neurons, but the functional organization they implement. A silicon-based computer running the same functional architecture could be conscious. This avoids species. Chauvinism, minds aren't limited to human brains. It also explains mental state multiple realizability. Pain in humans, octopuses, and hypothetical aliens might have different physical bases, but share functional roles. Functionalism supports artificial intelligence possibilities. Sufficiently sophisticated I could genuinely think and feel. But critics raise problems. Could a system implementing the right functions without consciousness exist? Doesn't this show consciousness isn't purely functional? Does functionalism capture qualitative feels, what it's like to see red? Functionalism remains influential in cognitive science, and I but faces ongoing challenges about consciousness's nature. Property dualism, one substance, two properties. Property dualism accepts that only physical substance exists, but argues it has two types of properties, physical and mental. Consciousness is a special property that emerges from physical matter, but cannot be reduced to it. It's a middle ground between substance dualism and pure materialism. Property dualists say the brain is purely physical, but when organized in certain complex ways, it generates genuinely novel mental properties that can't be explained by or reduced to underlying physics. Think of it like water. Two molecules have certain properties, but when combined, they produce wetness, a property that individual molecules don't possess. Similarly, neurons have physical properties, but consciousness emerges as a fundamentally new kind of property. This view accepts neuroscience's findings that mental states correlate with brain states while maintaining that subjective experience is something real and distinct that can't be eliminated or fully explained by physical descriptions alone. Critics from materialist camps argue this is dualism in disguise, still leaving the interaction problem unsolved. Critics from dualist camps argue it doesn't take consciousness seriously enough, but property dualism captures many people's intuitions. We're physical beings, yet consciousness seems irreducibly different from mere matter. Eliminative materialism. Folk psychology is false. Eliminativism argues that our common sense understanding of mind, beliefs, desires, consciousness is fundamentally wrong. As neuroscience advances, these folk psychology concepts will be eliminated and replaced with accurate scientific descriptions of brain processes. Eliminative materialists like Paul and Patricia Churchland argue that terms like belief, desire, and even consciousness are part of a false, outdated theory comparable to phlogiston or vital spirits. Future neuroscience won't vindicate these concepts but replace them entirely. We'll stop saying, I believe it will rain, and instead describe the relevant neural configurations directly. This seems radical because it denies the reality of mental states we experience directly. But eliminativists point out that science frequently shows common sense concepts are confused. We don't have one unified self, just competing brain systems. We don't have free will in the sense we imagine. Our introspection is unreliable. Why privilege folk psychology over scientific understanding? Critics argue eliminativism is self-refuting. If beliefs don't exist, how can eliminativists believe their theory? And it seems to deny the one thing we know most directly, our own conscious experience. Eliminativism remains controversial, but forces us to question whether our intuitive self-understanding is accurate. Panpsychism. Consciousness is everywhere. Panpsychism claims that consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality present to some degree in all things, even atoms. Human consciousness is a complex form of something that exists throughout nature. This view attempts to solve the hard problem of consciousness. If consciousness is fundamental, like mass, charge, or spin, then it doesn't need to be explained as emerging from non-conscious matter. Electrons have charge as a basic property. They also have some primitive form of experience or proto-consciousness. When organized into complex systems like brains, these micro-experiences combine into rich human consciousness. Panpsychism sounds crazy, but has serious philosophical pedigree and is gaining renewed interest. It solves the emergence problem. Consciousness doesn't mysteriously arise from non-conscious matter because there is no non-conscious matter. It's everywhere, just in different degrees and combinations. Critics face the combination problem. How do tiny conscious particles combine into unified human experience? If every neuron is conscious, why do I have one unified consciousness rather than billions of separate ones? Panpsychists work on these problems, but panpsychism represents a genuine alternative to both materialism and dualism. Emergentism. New properties arise. Emergentism holds that complex systems can have properties their parts don't have. Consciousness emerges from brain complexity. It's more than the sum of neurons. Water's liquidity emerges from H2O molecules. This explains how new phenomena arise without reduction. The key insight is that organization matters. Individual ants follow simple rules, but ant colonies exhibit complex adaptive behaviors no individual ant possesses. Similarly, neurons firing according to physical laws somehow give rise to consciousness, subjective experience, and rationality properties that individual neurons lack. Emergence is everywhere in nature. Chemistry emerges from physics, but has its own laws. Biology emerges from chemistry, psychology from biology. Each level has genuine causal powers not reducible to lower levels. Strong emergence means higher levels are genuinely novel and can't even in principle be predicted from complete knowledge of lower levels. Weak emergence means they're surprising, but theoretically predictable. Critics argue emergence is either mysterious, strong version, or not really emergence, weak version. But emergentists argue it's the best explanation for how complex realities like life, mind, and consciousness arise from simpler components without invoking supernatural intervention. Reductionism, explaining by parts. Reductionism attempts to explain complex phenomena by breaking them down into simpler components. Biology reduces to chemistry, chemistry to physics. While powerful, reductionism struggles with phenomena that seem irreducibly complex, like consciousness or meaning. Reductionism has been science's most successful strategy. Understanding organisms requires understanding cells. Understanding cells requires understanding molecules. Understanding molecules requires understanding atoms. Each level explains the one above. In principle, all sciences reduce to physics, the fundamental level describing reality's basic building blocks and laws. This methodological reductionism yields tremendous explanatory and predictive power. But does it capture everything? Some argue consciousness, intentionality, and meaning resist reduction. Knowing every neural firing pattern during love doesn't capture what love feels like. Understanding every word in Shakespeare doesn't explain why his plays are meaningful. Critics argue reductionism commits a fallacy. Explaining parts doesn't automatically explain the whole. Context, relationships, and higher-level organization matter. Defenders respond that resistance to reduction reflects current ignorance, not principled impossibility. The reductionism debate shapes philosophy of science, mind, and biology. Holism, the whole is greater. Holism argues that systems must be understood as wholes, not just as collections of parts. The whole has properties that cannot be predicted from examining components in isolation. Meaning, for instance, emerges from context, not individual words. Holists emphasize relationships, patterns, and contexts. A heart makes no sense in isolation, only within an organism's circulatory system. A word's meaning depends on its relations to other words and context of use. An ecosystem can't be understood by studying species separately. It's the interactions that matter. Quantum entanglement shows even physics isn't purely reductionist. Entangled particles form holistic systems, where the whole has properties neither part possesses independently. Holism appears in medicine, ecology, and philosophy of language. Critics worry holism becomes vague and unscientific, rejecting rigorous analysis. But holists argue many phenomena genuinely require holistic understanding. You can know every tree without understanding the forest. Holism and reductionism represent complementary approaches. Sometimes we need to break things down. Sometimes we need to step back and see the big picture. Atomism, reality is particles. Ancient atomism, from Democritus to modern physics, claims that reality consists of indivisible fundamental particles moving through void. Everything we experience results from these atoms' arrangements and interactions. Modern quantum mechanics has complicated but not abandoned this view. The ancient atomists were remarkably prescient. They argued that solid objects are mostly empty space with tiny particles, that differences between substances reflect atomic arrangement, and that change is just atoms rearranging. Modern physics vindicated much of this. Though atoms aren't indivisible, they have nuclei and electrons, and quantum mechanics shows particles behave strangely, sometimes like waves. Contemporary atomism faces challenges. What about fields? Electromagnetic, gravitational? Are they particles or something else? String theory posits tiny vibrating strings, not point particles. Quantum field theory treats particles as excitations in underlying fields, so maybe fields are more fundamental. But the atomistic impulse, explaining complexity by appeal to simple fundamental entities, remains powerful. Atomism represents one extreme. Reality's building blocks are discrete particles. Its opposite would be that reality is continuous, with particles being abstractions. This foundational question about reality's ultimate nature remains unresolved. Organicism. Reality is interconnected. Organicism views reality as an interconnected whole, like a living organism. Parts are defined by their relationships within the system. This holistic view influences ecology, systems theory, and process philosophy, emphasizing dynamic relationships over static entities. Rather than thinking of reality as composed of independent atoms that happen to interact, organicism sees reality as fundamentally relational. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything is what it is because of its relationships. An electron's properties depend on its quantum field context. An organism's nature depends on its ecosystem. A person's identity depends on their relationships and community. Process philosophy, developed by Whitehead, exemplifies organicism. Reality isn't made of things but of events and processes. What we call objects are relatively stable patterns in dynamic processes. The universe is more like an organism, integrated, self-organizing, evolving than a machine. Organicism influences environmental thought. Nature is an integrated whole, not a resource stockpile. It affects social philosophy. Individuals are inherently social, not autonomous atoms who choose to associate. Critics see organicism as vague, anthropomorphizing reality. But defenders argue it better captures reality's dynamic, interconnected character than mechanical atomism. Mechanism, the universe as machine. Mechanism treats natural phenomena as machines operating according to physical laws. Living beings are complex machines. This view, dominant since the scientific revolution, has been enormously productive but struggles to account for consciousness and purpose. Descartes pioneered modern mechanism, treating animals as complex automata. The heart is a pump, lungs are bellows, the body is a machine. This view enabled modern biology and medicine by refusing appeals to mysterious vital forces and instead seeking mechanical explanations. The success has been spectacular. We've explained inheritance through dye machinery, metabolism through biochemical pathways, evolution through natural selection's algorithm. Mechanism became science's default framework. But mechanism faces limits. Can consciousness be mechanistically explained? What about intentionality? How thoughts are about things? Purpose and meaning seem irreducible to mechanical processes. Critics argue mechanism works for some domains but becomes reductionist when extended to everything. Defenders respond that mechanism's success suggests it's fundamentally right, and apparent exceptions reflect current ignorance. The mechanism debate connects to broader questions about whether reality is fundamentally purposeful or purposeless, alive or dead, meaningful or merely mechanical. Teleology, purpose in nature. Teleology is the study of purposes, ends, or goals. Some philosophers argue that natural processes are directed toward ends. Acorns grow to become oaks. While modern science generally rejects this, questions about purpose remain in discussions of consciousness and evolution. Aristotle saw nature as fundamentally purposeful. Everything has a telos, a goal, or end it naturally moves toward. Acorns aim at becoming oaks. The eye's purpose is seeing. This teleological worldview made nature intelligible. Things do what they do because of their inherent purposes. Modern science rejected teleology. Newton's laws don't reference purposes. Evolution has no goal. Particles don't aim anywhere. Apparent purpose is just mechanical causation or natural selection's result. Eyes weren't designed for seeing. Seeing evolved because eyes gave survival advantage. But teleology persists in some contexts. We can't avoid purposive language for behavior. The bird flew south to find food. Functions and purposes seem ineliminable from biology, and consciousness seems inherently purposeful, directed at objects pursuing goals. Some philosophers argue teleology needs rehabilitation. Others insist it's prescientific anthropomorphism we must eliminate. This debate affects how we understand life, mind, and whether the universe has inherent meaning. Consequentialism. Outcomes matter most. Consequentialism judges actions solely by their consequences. Good actions produce good outcomes. Bad actions produce bad outcomes. Utilitarianism is the most famous form, but all consequentialist theories focus on results rather than intentions or rules. The intuitive appeal is strong. Surely what matters morally is whether your actions make the world better or worse. A well-intentioned action that causes disaster is bad. An action done for wrong reasons that saves lives is good. Consequentialism provides clear decision procedures, identify possible actions, predict consequences, choose the action maximizing good outcomes. This approach seems practical and rational, but consequentialism faces serious challenges. Unintended effects ripple forward unpredictably. Does consequentialism demand too much? Must we always maximize good, never relaxing or pursuing personal projects? Does it justify atrocities if consequences are good enough? Could you torture one innocent person to save a city? Consequentialists bite bullets, refine theories, and argue that critics rely on unreliable intuitions. But the tension remains. Consequentialism captures something important. Outcomes matter, while seemingly conflicting with deep moral convictions about rights, duties, and human dignity. Non-consequentialism. Actions have intrinsic worth. Non-consequentialism argues that some actions are right or wrong, regardless of consequences. Deontology is the prime example. Lying is wrong, even if it produces good outcomes. These theories emphasize duties, rights, or the intrinsic nature of acts. The core insight, morality isn't just about outcomes. Process matters. Human dignity matters. You can't murder an innocent person, even to save 5 lives, because murder violates that person's rights and treats them as mere means. Some actions are simply wrong in themselves, not because of bad consequences, but because of what they are. Torture is wrong not mainly because it causes suffering, but because it degrades human dignity. Non-consequentialists typically appeal to duties, rights, virtues, or divine commands as grounding morality. This provides moral absolutes, certain things you must never do, period. But critics ask, if following a rule leads to catastrophic consequences, aren't you obligated to break it? If lying to a murderer saves an innocent life, isn't lying required? Non-consequentialists respond with distinctions and argue that consequentialism's willingness to violate rights for good outcomes threatens all moral limits. The debate reflects deep disagreement about morality's foundation. Ethical egoism. Pursue your own good. Ethical egoism claims that individuals should always act in their own self-interest. Morality means doing what benefits you most. While this sounds selfish, some argue that rational self-interest actually promotes cooperation and social harmony. Ayn Rand championed ethical egoism, arguing that altruism is immoral and that rational selfishness is virtue. Each person's life is their own. They're not sacrificial offerings for others. Pursuing your own happiness and flourishing is moral. Sacrificing yourself for others is not. This doesn't mean doing whatever you want. Rationality requires long-term thinking, and cooperation often serves self-interest better than conflict. Critics see ethical egoism as morally repugnant. Doesn't morality mean going beyond self-interest? If everyone pursued only their own good, wouldn't society collapse? Ethical egoists respond that genuine cooperation serves self-interest better than exploitation. Enlightened self-interest includes maintaining reputation, reciprocal relationships, and social stability. They argue that altruism is either disguised egoism, you help others because it feels good, or irrational self-sacrifice. This radically individualistic morality challenges conventional ethics, but raises important questions about self-sacrifice's value and whether morality requires transcending self-interest. Ethical altruism prioritizes others' good. Ethical altruism holds that we should act for the benefit of others, even at cost to ourselves. This contrasts with egoism, arguing that genuine morality requires selflessness. Questions arise about whether pure altruism exists, or if all actions have selfish motives. Altruism says morality fundamentally means caring for others' welfare. Self-sacrifice for others' benefit is morally praiseworthy, perhaps required. Parents sacrifice for children, soldiers for comrades, donors for strangers. This selflessness seems morally admirable in ways self-interested behavior never is. But psychological egoism challenges altruism empirically. Perhaps apparently altruistic acts are really selfish. You donate to feel good. You help friends to maintain relationships. You sacrifice for children to spread your genes. Maybe pure altruism doesn't exist. All behavior is ultimately self-interested. Ethical altruists respond that even if we get satisfaction from helping others, that doesn't make the act selfish. The mother who risks her life for her child isn't primarily seeking good feelings, and ethical altruism isn't descriptive, how we act, but prescriptive, how we should act. We should cultivate genuine concern for others' welfare. The debate connects to questions about human nature, evolution, and what morality fundamentally requires. Divine command theory. God defines morality. Divine command theory states that moral values are determined by God's commands. What's right is what God commands, what's wrong is what God forbids. This provides objective morality, but raises the Euthyphro dilemma. Is something good because God commands it, or does God command it because it's good? For divine command theorists, God's will is morality's foundation. Murder is wrong because God forbids it. This makes morality objective, independent of human opinion, while grounding it in a transcendent authority. Without God, moral claims are just preferences. With God, they're absolute. But Plato's Euthyphro dilemma creates problems. If things are good only because God commands them, morality seems arbitrary. God could have made torture good. If God commands things because they're independently good, then morality exists independently of God, and God isn't morality's foundation after all. Divine command theorists typically respond that God's nature is good, so God couldn't command cruelty. It would contradict God's nature. But critics say this makes goodness independent of commands, undermining the theory. Despite challenges, divine command theory remains influential, especially among religious believers who see morality as impossible without God. Natural law theory, morality from nature. Natural law theory, from Aquinas, argues that moral principles are discovered through reason by examining human nature and the natural world. What fulfills human nature is good, what frustrates it is bad. These laws are universal and objective. Natural law theorists identify goods inherent to human nature: life, knowledge, friendship, reproduction, practical reasonableness. These aren't arbitrary but flow from what humans are. We're rational social animals, so rationality and sociality are natural goods. Acts that respect and promote these goods are moral. Acts that violate them are immoral. Natural law is universal because human nature is universal. It's objective because discovered through reason, not invented. It's accessible to all rational beings, regardless of religious belief. Though often given theological foundation, God designed human nature. Critics raise problems. Ought gap. How do we get from facts about human nature, descriptive, to moral obligations, prescriptive? Which aspects of human nature are morally relevant? We're naturally violent, aggressive, and tribal. Does that make those behaviors good? Natural law theorists respond with sophisticated accounts of human flourishing and practical reason. Natural law remains influential in Catholic moral theology and among conservatives seeking objective moral foundations. Social contract, morality as agreement. Social contract theory sees morality as a set of rules people agree to follow for mutual benefit. Without this implicit contract, society would collapse into chaos. Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau developed different versions of this influential theory. Hobbes imagined the state of nature before society. Life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Everyone pursuing self-interest leads to war of all against all. Rational self-interest, therefore, motivates entering a social contract. We agree to limit our freedom and follow rules in exchange for security and cooperation. Morality is the set of mutually beneficial rules. Locke emphasized natural rights that the social contract protects. Rousseau focused on collective sovereignty and general will. Modern versions like Rawls's ask, what principles would rational people choose behind a veil of ignorance, not knowing their position in society? Social contract provides naturalistic moral foundations without God and explains morality's authority. We're bound because we consented, explicitly or implicitly. Critics ask, when did we consent? What about people unable to consent? Does this make morality conventional rather than objective? Defenders argue the contract is hypothetical, about what we would rationally agree to, making it objective without being mysterious. Care ethics, relationships, and empathy. Care ethics, often associated with feminist philosophy, emphasizes relationships, empathy, and care for particular individuals over abstract principles. Morality grows from our interconnectedness and responsibilities to those close to us, not universal rules. Carol Gilligan pioneered care ethics by challenging Colbert's stages of moral development, which ranked principled reasoning highest. Gilligan found women often reason differently, emphasizing relationships and care rather than abstract justice. Care ethics emerge from this insight. Morality isn't primarily about applying universal principles impartially, but about maintaining relationships and responding to particular needs with empathy. A care ethicist asks, who will be affected? What are my relationships and responsibilities here? How can I respond with care? This contrasts with justice ethics that asks, what abstract principle applies? Care ethics values contextual, emotional, relational, moral thinking. Critics worry it's relativistic, lacks guidelines for resolving conflicts, and potentially reinforces women's traditional caregiver roles. Defenders argue it corrects male biased philosophy's excessive abstraction and captures important moral dimensions that principle-based approaches miss. We have special obligations to family and friends that can't be captured by impartial universalism. Contractarianism, mutually beneficial cooperation. Contractarianism grounds morality in mutual advantage. We follow moral rules because everyone benefits from cooperation. Unlike social contract theory, which may appeal to consent, contractarianism focuses on rational self-interest in cooperative arrangements. David Gauthier developed modern contractarianism. Morality emerges from rational bargaining among self-interested individuals. We're better off cooperating than not, so we agree on rules enabling cooperation. These rules constitute morality. This explains moral motivation. Following rules is rationally required because it serves your interest in a society of reciprocators. Contractarianism explains why we have moral rules and why we should follow them without appealing to mysterious intuitions or divine commands. It's naturalistic and rational, but critics raise problems. What about those who can't reciprocate, severely disabled people, animals, future generations? Contractarianism seems to exclude them from moral consideration since they can't benefit us. Contractarians respond with indirect arguments or accept limited moral circles. The debate highlights tensions between self-interest and morality. Contractarianism tries to derive morality from self-interest, but can genuine morality be so grounded? Moral particularism. Context is everything. Moral particularism rejects universal moral principles, arguing that what's right or wrong depends entirely on the specific situation. No action is inherently good or bad. Context determines morality. This challenges principle-based ethics, but captures moral complexity. Jonathan Dancy argues against moral generalism, the view that moral reasons can be codified in principles. What counts as a moral reason in one context might not in another. Lying is usually wrong, but not when deceiving Nazis to save Jews. Killing is usually wrong, but not in self-defense. Particularists say these aren't exceptions to rules but show that morality is irreducibly contextual. We must judge each situation on its particular features without applying universal principles. This requires moral wisdom and sensitivity rather than rule following. Critics argue particularism makes morality arbitrary and unguidable. Without principles, how do we make decisions or justify them? How do we teach morality? Particularists respond that principles oversimplify moral reality. Moral judgment requires practical wisdom perceiving situations' morally relevant features, not mechanical rule application. This debate reflects tension between wanting clear moral guidance and recognizing moral life's complexity. Intuitionism. Moral truths are self-evident. Moral intuitionism claims we know moral truths through direct intuition, similar to how we know mathematical truths. Some things are just obviously right or wrong. We don't derive these from other principles, we simply perceive them. G.E. Moore argued, good is indefinable, known through intuition. When you witness cruelty, you directly perceive its wrongness without inferring from principles. These moral intuitions are self-evident to properly functioning moral sense, like colors are self-evident to properly functioning vision. Intuitionism explains moral knowledge without reduction to natural facts or divine commands. We have rational insight into moral truths. This avoids naturalistic fallacy while maintaining moral realism. But critics raise problems. People's intuitions conflict. Whose are reliable? How do we resolve disagreements without independent standard? Intuitionism seems epistemically mysterious. How does this moral perception work? What mechanism connects minds to moral facts? Defenders argue, ethical intuitions, like mathematical ones, can be refined through reflection and dialectic. Disagreement doesn't prove absence of truth. Intuitionism remains influential, especially as foundation for common sense morality against theories that yield counterintuitive implications. Emotivism. Moral statements express feelings. Emotivism argues that moral statements don't express facts but emotions. Saying murder is wrong is like saying boo to murder, expressing disapproval, not stating truth. This meta-ethical theory challenges the idea that moral claims can be true or false. A.J. Ayer championed emotivism, applying logical positivism to ethics. Meaningful statements must be either analytically true or empirically verifiable. They express emotions and attitudes, not facts. When you say stealing is wrong, you're expressing negative emotion towards stealing and perhaps trying to evoke similar feelings in others. Emotivism explains moral disagreement. We're not disagreeing about facts, but expressing conflicting attitudes. It explains moral language's motivational force. Emotions naturally motivate action. But critics argue emotivism can't account for moral reasoning and truth. If moral statements just express emotions, moral arguments make no sense. We'd just be comparing feelings. Emotivism makes moral progress impossible and can't distinguish between genuine moral views and mere prejudices. Despite problems, emotivism influenced thinking about moral language and motivated development of more sophisticated non-cognitive theories. Prescriptivism. Moral statements are commands. Prescriptivism holds that moral statements are prescriptions or commands. Saying lying is wrong means don't lie. Moral language guides action rather than describing facts. This view influences how we understand moral disagreement and justification. R.M. Hare developed prescriptivism as improvement on emotivism. Moral statements aren't just emotional expressions but universal prescriptions. When I say lying is wrong, I'm committing to universal principle, don't lie, anyone, anytime, similar circumstances. This universalizability introduces rationality. I must be consistent, willing to apply the principle when I'm the victim. Prescriptivism explains morality's action-guiding function while introducing rational constraints, but it's non-cognitivist. Moral statements aren't true or false, they're commands. Critics ask, why are we bound by prescriptions? If I prescribe differently than you, is there no fact about who's right? Prescriptivism struggles to account for moral truth and knowledge. Defenders argue it captures something important, morality's essentially practical nature. Moral thinking aims at guiding action, not just describing reality. Whether prescriptivism adequately accounts for moral objectivity remains debated, but it influenced understanding of moral language's distinctive features. Moral realism. Moral facts exist. Moral realism asserts that moral statements can be objectively true or false, independent of human opinion. Murder really is wrong, just as 2 + 2 = 4 is true. These moral facts exist in reality, waiting to be discovered. Realists argue, moral judgments purport to state facts. When we say slavery is wrong, we mean to describe reality, not just express feelings. If moral anti-realism were true, moral arguments would make no sense. We'd just be comparing subjective preferences. But moral disputes feel substantive. We think there are right answers, that moral progress occurs, that some views are mistaken. Realism best explains this. Different realist versions exist. Naturalistic realists identify moral facts with natural facts, like well-being. Non-naturalistic realists see moral facts as sui generis, not reducible to natural facts. But critics ask, what are these moral facts? Where do they exist? How do we access them? If not reducible to natural facts, they seem metaphysically queer. Realism faces epistemological and metaphysical challenges, but captures our ordinary moral thinking's objectivist assumptions. Moral anti-realism. No objective morality. Moral anti-realism denies that objective moral facts exist. Morality is constructed by humans through culture, emotion, or agreement. This umbrella includes emotivism, relativism, and error theory. What we call morality is human invention, not discovery. Anti-realists argue morality emerged through evolution, culture, and social construction, not through discovering mind-independent facts. Moral diversity across cultures suggests morality is conventional. Science studies natural world but finds no moral facts among electrons and gravity. Moral facts would be metaphysically bizarre. Different anti-realist versions exist. Constructivists say morality is constructed but still normative. Relativists say moral truth is relative to culture. Error theorists say moral claims systematically fail to refer. Anti-realism faces challenges. Can it account for moral criticism across cultures? Does it make moral progress impossible? Can it motivate moral behavior without objectivity? Different anti-realist theories answer differently, but all share rejection of mind-independent moral facts, seeing morality as human creation serving various psychological and social functions. Error theory. All moral claims are false. Error theory, a form of moral anti-realism, claims that while moral statements try to express facts, they always fail. All moral claims are systematically false. We speak as if objective morality exists, but it doesn't. Morality is based on a mistake. J.L. Mackie defended error theory. Ordinary moral language presupposes objective moral facts that would be metaphysically bizarre. These facts would need to be intrinsically motivating. Recognizing wrongness automatically motivates avoiding it, and universally binding. But nothing in reality fits that description. So all moral claims are false. Not meaningless like emotivism says, but false. We're systematically mistaken about morality's nature. Error theory differs from other anti-realisms by accepting moral language's cognitive, fact-stating function while denying moral facts exist. This makes all moral assertions false. Error theorists typically advocate abandoning morality or reinterpreting it as something else, like instrumental rationality. Critics argue error theory is deeply revisionary and practically unlivable. Can we really believe all moral claims are false? Error theorists respond that truth matters more than comfort, and we're mistaken about many things we take for granted. Expressivism. Moral language expresses attitudes. Expressivism sees moral language as expressing attitudes rather than stating facts. Honesty is good. Expresses approval of honesty. Unlike error theory, expressivism doesn't say moral claims are false. They're simply not the kinds of things that can be true or false. Modern expressivism, developed by Blackburn and Gibbard, is more sophisticated than simple emotivism. It aims to explain how moral language functions in reasoning, embedding, and logic, while maintaining non-cognitivism. Moral statements express conative states, desires, plans, attitudes, rather than cognitive states, beliefs. But unlike crude emotivism, expressivism can account for complex moral reasoning by developing logic of attitudes. Expressivism faces the Frege-Gage problem. How do moral terms work in embedded contexts like, if lying is wrong, then getting your brother to lie is wrong? Expressivists have developed sophisticated responses involving systems of attitudes and plans. Whether expressivism can fully account for moral language's logical behavior remains debated. but it represents the most sophisticated development of non-cognitivism, trying to preserve moral discourse's features while denying moral facts. Constructivism. We construct moral truths. Moral constructivism argues that moral truths are constructed through rational procedures or idealized agreements. Unlike relativism, where anything goes, constructivism identifies objective procedures that yield moral truths, even if they're not discovered but created. Rawls's constructivism asks what principles rational people would choose behind a veil of ignorance. Korsgaard's constructivism derives obligations from practical reason structure. Scanlon's contractualism constructs morality from what couldn't be reasonably rejected. These procedures yield objective answers even though moral facts don't exist independently. The construction procedure itself is objective. Constructivism navigates between realism and anti-realism. It's not full realism. Moral truths don't exist independently of rational construction, but it's not relativism. The construction procedure is universal and rational. Critics ask whether construction really avoids realism. Aren't facts about what's rational still objective, moral facts? Or whether it avoids relativism, couldn't different rational procedures yield different moralities? Constructivism remains influential, especially for providing moral objectivity without metaphysically mysterious moral facts. Nihilism in ethics. Nothing has moral value. Moral nihilism claims that nothing is inherently moral or immoral. No actions, people, or things have moral value. This radical position suggests that morality is entirely illusory. While logically possible, most philosophers and people reject this unsettling view. Nihilism says there are no moral constraints, no moral facts, no moral truth. Nothing is really right or wrong. These are just labels humans invented. Murder isn't wrong. Charity isn't good. These evaluations are projections, not discoveries. Nihilism is more extreme than error theory, which says moral claims are false, or emotivism, which says they express emotions. Nihilism denies morality's reality completely. Critics argue nihilism is unlivable. Can anyone truly believe nothing matters morally? Wouldn't this lead to sociopathy or paralysis? And nihilism seems self-refuting. If nothing has value, why prefer nihilism to alternatives? Nihilists might respond that nihilism is just true. Reality's bleakness doesn't make it false. But even Nietzsche, often wrongly called nihilist, saw nihilism as a crisis to overcome, not a position to embrace. Pure moral nihilism has few genuine adherents, though it represents the logical extreme of anti-realism. Absurdism in ethics, creating value in meaninglessness. Absurdist ethics, following Camus, accepts that the universe provides no moral meaning but argues we can still create and act on values. We rebel against meaninglessness by living authentically and passionately, even knowing our values have no cosmic foundation. Absurdism occupies a middle ground between nihilism and existentialism. Like nihilists, absurdists accept the universe is indifferent and valueless. Unlike nihilists, absurdists embrace creating values and living ethically despite this. Like existentialists, absurdists emphasize authentic choice. Unlike some existentialists, absurdists don't claim we create objective meaning. We create personal values while acknowledging their ultimate groundlessness. This is the absurd, living as if values matter while knowing they don't ultimately. Camus' Sisyphus is happy because he embraces this absurdity, finding dignity in rebellion against meaninglessness. Absurdist ethics says, create your values, commit to them, live passionately, help others, reduce suffering, not because the universe demands it, but because you choose it. Critics question whether this differs from nihilism in practice. If values are groundless, why follow them? Absurdists respond that this misunderstands. Values don't need cosmic foundation to guide our lives. Pragmatic ethics, what works is right. Pragmatic ethics judges moral theories and actions by their practical consequences and usefulness. The right ethical framework is the one that helps us navigate moral dilemmas effectively. Truth in ethics, like truth generally, is what works. Pragmatists like Dewey and James reject abstract ethical theorizing disconnected from practice. Ethics should solve real problems, not construct ideal systems. Test moral views by consequences. Do they help people live better? Do they resolve conflicts? Do they promote flourishing? Good ethics works. Bad ethics doesn't. This seems to collapse ethics into consequentialism, but pragmatists deny this. They're meta-ethical pragmatists about which ethical theory to accept, not necessarily first-order consequentialists. A pragmatist might accept virtue ethics or deontology if those frameworks work better practically. Critics argue pragmatic ethics is too instrumentalist. Shouldn't we care whether our ethical views are true, not just useful? What if useful beliefs are false? Pragmatists respond that truth and usefulness can't be separated. Over time, true beliefs prove useful, false beliefs fail. Pragmatic ethics emphasizes experimental, revisable approach to morality rather than dogmatic adherence to abstract principles. Feminist ethics, correcting male-centered philosophy. Feminist ethics challenges traditional philosophy's male-dominated perspectives. It emphasizes care, relationships, and particular contexts over abstract universal principles. It questions whether seemingly neutral ethical theories actually reflect and perpetuate patriarchal biases. Feminist ethicists note that traditional ethics was developed almost entirely by men, often explicitly excluding women's moral reasoning. Kohlberg studied only boys. Kant thought women lacked rational autonomy for moral agency. Feminist ethics corrects these biases by including women's voices and experiences. Care ethics emerge from feminist thought, challenging justice-focused approaches. Feminist ethicists also examine how supposedly universal principles often reflect masculine values, autonomy, independence, rights, while devaluing feminine values, care, relationality, responsibility. They analyze power dynamics, oppression, and how social structures shape moral thinking. Feminist ethics isn't just adding women's perspectives, but fundamentally reconceiving ethics. It questions the ideal of impartiality, emphasizes embodiment and emotion's role in moral reasoning, and connects personal ethics to political justice. Critics worry feminist ethics risks essentialism or relativism. Defenders argue it enriches ethics by correcting long-standing biases and expanding moral philosophy's scope. Applied ethics, philosophy and practice. Applied ethics takes philosophical theories and applies them to real-world issues: medical ethics, business ethics, environmental ethics, animal rights. Rather than abstract theorizing, applied ethics tackles concrete moral dilemmas we actually face. Applied ethics emerged as distinct field in the 1960s noughties as new technologies and social movements raised novel ethical questions. When does life begin and end? Is abortion permissible? Euthanasia? Are animals' interests morally considerable? What do we owe future generations? Can we ethically modify genes? Applied ethicists bring philosophical rigor to these questions, analyzing concepts, testing theories against cases, and developing practical guidance. The field combines theoretical sophistication with practical relevance. Applied ethics can expose theoretical inadequacies. If a theory yields obviously wrong conclusions in practice that challenges the theory, it also shows philosophy's continued relevance. These aren't just academic puzzles but urgent questions affecting lives. Critics sometimes see applied ethics as atheoretical or inconsistent. Defenders argue practical wisdom requires both theoretical frameworks and sensitivity to particular cases. Applied ethics represents philosophy engaged with the world, not ivory tower abstraction. Bioethics, ethics of life sciences. Bioethics examines moral issues in medicine, biology, and healthcare: abortion, euthanasia, genetic engineering, organ transplantation. As technology advances, bioethics becomes increasingly crucial for navigating unprecedented ethical terrain. Bioethics emerged in the 1960s as medical technology created new possibilities and dilemmas. Ventilators could sustain life in brain-dead patients. So when is someone really dead? In vitro fertilization separated reproduction from sex, so what's the moral status of embryos? Genetic testing revealed predispositions. So who should have access to that information? Bioethics principles emerged: autonomy, respect patients' choices; beneficence, promote well-being; non-maleficence, don't harm; and justice, fair distribution. But applying these principles to complex cases remains challenging. Should we edit human embryos to eliminate diseases? Allow parents to select children's traits? Permit selling organs? Allocate scarce resources by age, quality of life, or lottery? Bioethics combines philosophy, medicine, law, and public policy. It shapes actual practices through hospital ethics committees, review boards, and policy recommendations. As biotechnology advances, AI diagnosis, brain-computer interfaces, artificial wombs, bioethics faces ever newer challenges. Environmental ethics, our duty to nature. Environmental ethics explores our moral obligations to the natural world. Do animals have rights? Do ecosystems have value beyond human use? How should we balance human needs with environmental protection? This field becomes more urgent as ecological crises deepen. Traditional ethics focused on human-to-human obligations. Environmental ethics expands moral consideration. Anthropocentrism says only humans matter morally. Nature has merely instrumental value. Sentiocentrism extends moral status to sentient beings capable of suffering. Biocentrism includes all living things. Ecocentrism values ecosystems and species themselves, not just individuals. Deep ecology sees humans as equal members of Earth's community, not superior rulers. These frameworks yield different conclusions. Is hunting wrong? Depends whether animals have rights. Should we preserve endangered species? Depends whether species have intrinsic value. Can we use nature as resource? Depends on our relationship to nature. Environmental ethics also examines intergenerational justice. What do we owe future generations? And environmental justice. Why do environmental harms disproportionately affect poor and marginalized communities? As climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution intensify, environmental ethics isn't just academic but existentially urgent. Animal ethics. Do animals matter morally? Animal ethics examines whether and why animals deserve moral consideration. Singer's utilitarian approach emphasizes suffering. Reagan argues for animal rights. Questions about eating meat, animal testing, and wildlife conservation all fall within this domain. Singer's animal liberation sparked modern animal ethics. He argues that capacity for suffering, not species membership, determines moral status. Since animals suffer, their interests matter morally. Excluding animals from moral consideration is speciesism. Arbitrary discrimination like racism or sexism. Utilitarianism demands reducing animal suffering, which challenges factory farming, animal testing, and hunting. Reagan takes a rights-based approach. Animals aren't just sentients but subjects of a life with inherent value. They have rights not to be treated as mere resources. This prohibits using them even for human benefit. Others argue animals lack rationality, language, or moral agency necessary for rights. Contractarians exclude animals since they can't reciprocate. Virtue ethicists focus on what treatment of animals reveals about our character. Practical implications are enormous. Should we be vegetarian? Ban animal testing? Most people accept some animals, mammals, birds, have moral status while disagreeing about extent and implications. Transhumanism, enhancing humanity. Transhumanism advocates using technology to enhance human intellectual, physical, and psychological capacities. It raises profound questions. Should we modify human nature? What are the ethics of radical life extension? Will enhancements create inequality? Transhumanists see human limitations as problems to solve, not given conditions to accept. Why accept death, disease, and cognitive limits when technology could overcome them? They advocate developing artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, nanotech, and brain-computer interfaces to radically enhance human capabilities. Imagine living hundreds of years, having perfect memory, experiencing emotions more richly, or uploading consciousness to computers. Critics raise concerns. Will enhancements create genetic divide between enhanced and unenhanced? Will technologies be distributed justly? Should we modify human nature, which might have evolved wisdom we don't understand? Are some human limitations actually valuable? Bioconservatives argue human nature has dignity that shouldn't be technologically altered. Transhumanists respond that we've always modified ourselves. glasses, vaccines, education. This just extends that. The debate involves empirical questions, what's possible, and value questions, what should we do? As technology advances, these become increasingly urgent. Existential risk, philosophy of human extinction. Existential risk philosophy examines threats that could cause human extinction or permanent civilizational collapse: nuclear war, climate change, artificial intelligence, biotechnology. What are our obligations to future generations? How should we prioritize these catastrophic risks? Nick Bostrom pioneered existential risk studies. He distinguishes existential risks threatening humanity's entire future potential from catastrophes, terrible but recoverable. Nuclear war could be existential. A pandemic probably isn't. The stakes are astronomical. Trillions of future lives potentially prevented from existing. This raises prioritization questions. Should we focus resources on reducing existential risks? How do we balance present needs against hypothetical future catastrophes? The philosophy involves probability. How likely are these risks? Ethics. How much do future people matter? And epistemology. Can we trust our judgments about unprecedented threats? Critics worry about fear, mongering, or misallocating resources from present suffering. Defenders argue that failing to take existential risks seriously could mean ending humanity's story prematurely. As technological power grows, existential risk philosophy becomes crucial for navigating an increasingly dangerous world. Philosophy of technology. Tools shape us. Philosophy of technology examines how technology affects human existence, society, and values. Technologies aren't neutral tools. They shape how we think, relate, and understand reality. From smartphones to AI, technology raises profound philosophical questions. Heidegger argued technology creates a frame that shapes how we see reality, treating everything as standing reserve for use. We stop seeing rivers as places of beauty and see them as hydroelectric potential. Technology changes what it means to be human. McLuhan said, "The medium is the message." Technology's effects come from their form, not content. Print technology changed consciousness. Digital technology changes it again. We don't just use smartphones. They reshape attention, relationships, and selfhood. Philosophy of technology examines social media's effects on democracy, AI's implications for agency and responsibility, biotechnology's challenges to human nature, and surveillance technology's threats to freedom. It asks, do technologies have built-in values in politics? Are some technologies inherently good or bad? How should we govern technological development? As technology increasingly shapes life, thinking philosophically about technology becomes essential. Philosophy of artificial intelligence. Can machines think? This field explores whether machines can truly think, be conscious, or have moral status. What is intelligence? Could AI have rights or responsibilities? As AI advances, these questions move from abstract philosophy to urgent practical concerns. The Turing test asks, if a machine's responses are indistinguishable from humans, is it thinking? Searle's Chinese Room argues, no, simulation isn't understanding, but others argue that passing sophisticated tests would demonstrate genuine intelligence. What even is intelligence? Narrow AI exceeds humans in specific domains, chess, image recognition, but lacks general intelligence. Could artificial general intelligence arise? Would it be conscious? These aren't just science fiction. Modern AI makes medical diagnoses, drives cars, and generates text. Should we attribute agency and responsibility? If an autonomous vehicle kills someone, who's responsible? Questions multiply with advanced AI. Could superintelligent AI pose existential risk? Would conscious AI have rights? Could we create digital minds and, if so, what are the ethics of copying, modifying, or deleting them? Philosophy of AI examines intelligence, consciousness, personhood, and agency questions that will shape humanity's future as AI capabilities grow. Philosophy of information, data, and reality. Information philosophy examines the nature of information and its role in reality. Is information physical? Does it play a fundamental role in the universe? How does the information age change human existence and knowledge? Some physicists and philosophers argue information is fundamental. Wheeler's "it from bit" suggests reality emerges from information. Quantum mechanics shows information is physical. It can't be copied perfectly, and measurements change systems. Maybe information, not matter, is reality's basic constituent. Information theory, developed by Shannon, provides mathematical framework for measuring information. But what is information? Patterns? Meaningful data? Philosophy examines information's metaphysics. What is it? Epistemology. How does it relate to knowledge? And ethics, who should control it? The digital age raises new questions. Social media creates information bubbles. Algorithms curate what we see. Surveillance accumulates vast data. Information technologies mediate reality itself. Does living through screens change what it means to be human? Does constant information access change memory and cognition? Information philosophy examines these transformations. Quantum philosophy, reality at the smallest scale. Quantum mechanics raises profound philosophical questions. Does reality exist before measurement? Can things be in multiple states simultaneously? Does observation create reality? These aren't just physics questions, they're deeply metaphysical. The Copenhagen interpretation says, particles exist in superposition until measured. Reality is fundamentally probabilistic, not deterministic. But what counts as measurement? Does consciousness play a special role? The measurement problem remains unsolved. Many worlds interpretation says all possibilities actually occur in parallel universes. When you measure, the universe splits. This preserves determinism but multiplies universes extravagantly. Hidden variables theories say quantum randomness reflects ignorance, not fundamental indeterminacy. Reality is determinate. We just can't access it. Quantum mechanics challenges classical metaphysics. Objects don't have definite properties until measured. Entanglement shows non-locality particles instantly affect each other across distances. Can we trust our metaphysical categories? Does quantum mechanics show consciousness affects reality? Most physicists say no, but questions remain. Quantum philosophy examines measurement, causation, locality, determinism, and reality itself. Philosophy of time. Does the past exist? Philosophy of time examines whether past and future are real or only the present exists, whether time flows or is an illusion, whether time travel is possible, and what it means for events to be ordered temporally. Presentism says only the present exists. Past is gone, future doesn't yet exist. This matches experience. You can only access now. But presentism struggles with relativity, which shows simultaneity is relative. What counts as present depends on reference frame. Eternalism says all moments exist equally. Past, present, and future are all real-time is like space's fourth dimension. We experience one moment at a time, but all exist eternally. This fits relativity but conflicts with experience. Growing block theory says past and present exist, but future doesn't yet. A theory sees time as dynamic and flowing. B theory sees time as static series of moments. Does time pass, or do we just move through static time? Can we make sense of causation, change, and agency without temporal flow? These abstract questions affect everything: free will, persistence, personal identity, and reality's fundamental nature. Philosophy of space. What is extension? Is space a container for things or a relation between them? Does empty space exist? Is space finite or infinite? These ancient questions gain new dimensions from relativity and cosmology. Absolute space theory, Newton, says space is a container existing independently of objects within it. Relational space theory, Leibniz, says space is just relations between objects. Without objects, no space exists. Relativity vindicated relationalism partly. Space and time aren't absolute, but relative to observers. But space-time itself seems substantial. Gravity curves it. Contemporary physics asks whether space is fundamental or emergent from more basic entities. Is space continuous or discrete at smallest scales? Some quantum gravity theories suggest space emerges from networks of relations. The question, is space finite or infinite, remains open. The observable universe is finite, but what about beyond? Could space be finite without boundary, like sphere surface? These questions aren't just physics but metaphysics, about reality's fundamental structure. Philosophy of mathematics. Do numbers exist? Do mathematical objects exist independently of minds? Platonism. Or are they human creations? Nominalism. Why is mathematics so effective in describing physical reality? What is the relationship between mathematical truth and physical truth? Mathematical Platonists say numbers, sets, and functions exist in abstract realm. Mathematical truths are discovered, not invented. This explains mathematics' objectivity and necessity. But how do minds access abstract realm? This seems metaphysically mysterious. Nominalists deny abstract objects exist. Mathematics is language, symbols, or mental constructions. This avoids mysterious entities, but struggles to explain mathematics' objectivity. If we invent it, why can't we invent contradictory mathematics? Structuralism says mathematics studies structures and patterns, not objects. Numbers aren't things but positions in number structure. Formalism says mathematics is manipulating symbols according to rules. These debates matter because mathematics underpins science. If mathematical objects don't exist, what does physics describe? If they do exist, how does immaterial mathematics constrain physical reality? The mystery remains. Philosophy of logic. What follows from what? What makes an argument valid? Are logical laws discovered or invented? Could logic be different? These questions about logic's foundation in nature are central to all philosophical reasoning. Classical logic includes principles, non-contradiction, nothing is both true and false, excluded middle, everything is either true or false, identity, everything equals itself. But these have been challenged. Paraconsistent logics allow contradictions without making everything true. Intuitionistic logic rejects excluded middle. Fuzzy logic allows degrees of truth. Are these genuine alternatives or confused departures from correct logic? Logical pluralism says multiple logics are equally valid for different domains. Quantum logic might govern quantum phenomena. Classical logic governs macro level. Logical monism says one true logic exists. Alternatives are either wrong or practical shortcuts. These debates affect everything. If logic is conventional, truth might be too. If logic is necessary and universal, it provides foundation for knowledge. Philosophy of logic examines validity, truth, necessity, meaning, and rationality itself. Modal logic, possibility, and necessity. Modal logic deals with possibility, necessity, and contingency. It explores different possible worlds and what must be true versus what merely happens to be true. This framework is crucial for metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Possibility and necessity extend beyond actual truth. Water is H2O is actually true and necessarily true couldn't be otherwise. Snow is white is actually true, but contingently could have been false. Modal logic formalizes these distinctions. Possible world semantics. A statement is possibly true if true in some possible world, necessarily true if true in all possible worlds. This clarifies modal concepts but raises questions. Do possible worlds really exist, or are they useful fictions? Modal logic applies everywhere. Metaphysics. What exists necessarily versus contingently? Epistemology. Could our beliefs have been false? Ethics. What actions were possible in a situation? The framework allows precise reasoning about modality, though ultimate metaphysical questions about possibility's nature remain contested. Philosophy of death. What does mortality mean? Is death bad for the one who dies? Should we fear death? What, if anything, gives meaning to a finite life? Philosophers from Epicurus to Heidegger have grappled with mortality's implications for how we should live. Epicurus argued, death isn't bad because when death exists, you don't. Where death is, I am not. So why fear what you'll never experience? Others argue death is bad precisely because it deprives you of future goods. It's not the state of being dead, but dying that's harmful. Heidegger saw awareness of death as central to authentic existence. Being toward death individuates us and makes choices meaningful. Immortality would make everything postponable. Mortality creates urgency. Questions about afterlife, personal identity, and consciousness intersect here. If consciousness ends at death, does that make life meaningless or more precious? Should we pursue life extension or accept mortality? These aren't just abstract. They affect end-of-life care, medical research priorities, and how we allocate finite time. Death philosophy examines our most universal and personal fact. Philosophy of meaning. What makes life meaningful? What constitutes a meaningful life? Is meaning objective or subjective? Does life require purpose from outside itself, or can we create our own? This existential question synthesizes ethics, metaphysics, and philosophy of mind. Objective theories say meaning comes from connecting to something beyond yourself, God, truth, beauty, justice. Lives are meaningful when serving these transcendent goods. This provides clear standards but requires metaphysical commitments. Subjective theories say you determine what makes your life meaningful. Meaning comes from pursuing what you care about. This respects individual autonomy but risks reducing meaning to arbitrary preference. Hybrid theories combine elements. Meaning requires objective goods, achievement, relationships, knowledge, but subjective engagement, you must care about them. Philosophy of meaning also examines questions. Does suffering negate meaning? Can immoral lives be meaningful? Is meaning found or created? The question matters deeply. Many experience meaning crises, searching for why they exist. Philosophy can't give you meaning, but can clarify what you're asking for and what answers are available. Wisdom, philosophy lived. At the highest level, philosophy isn't just theory, it's lived wisdom. The examined life, ancient virtues, modern insights, all converge in practical wisdom. Philosophy at level 100 means embodying these ideas, living authentically, thinking clearly, acting ethically, and helping others do the same. Wisdom integrates knowledge, experience, and judgment. It's not just knowing philosophical theories, but applying them appropriately. The wise person recognizes situations' morally relevant features, exercises good judgment, maintains perspective, and acts virtuously naturally. Aristotle called it phronesis, practical wisdom. It comes from experience and habituation, not just study. You become wise by practicing wisdom. Philosophy at this level transforms you. It's not collecting abstract theories, but developing character, clarifying values, and living according to examined principles. The philosopher sage isn't necessarily a professor, but anyone who lives thoughtfully, questions deeply, acts ethically, and helps others flourish. This is philosophy's ultimate goal, not just understanding the world, but living well in it. The philosophical journey comes full circle, from questioning everything to understanding how to live well with uncertainty. From level 1's why to level 100's wisdom, the examined life fully realized.